The president's advisors expected to detail the proposal to later this week, but it's already drawing the ire of Republicans, partly because of how it's expected to be financed. Let's bring in Congressman Rodney Davis, representative from Illinois. We've also got Yahoo Finance's Jessica Smith joining in on the conversation. Congressman, it's great to talk to you today. Infrastructure is one of those issues where we have seen both bipartisan support. It comes with a big price tag, though, potentially $3 trillion. What are you hearing within your party about certain priorities that you'd be able to meet Democrats on?
Well, infrastructure priorities like rebuilding our crumbling roads and bridges, we can always find bipartisan support for that. The problem is how the Democrats are proposing to pay for this. They're going to stop economic growth after we come out of our pandemic, where we need our economic growth to be nuclearized. They're going to open up the tax code to pay for not just a partial amount of the $3 trillion for infrastructure. They're going to use the income tax code to pay for their climate priorities. And no matter what the Democrats are going to say about how they plan to pay for this, they're going to raise corporate income tax rates. Small businesses that have been hurting throughout this pandemic are going to see their taxes go up. And every single American is going to see a cost. This is why, and I don't think you can discount this, Akiko, that you see the markets down. When the White House proposes opening up the income tax code and raising taxes on virtually every American, it's going to have an effect on the market.
Hi, Congressman Jessica Smith here. How do you pay for it then? If you don't want to raise taxes, how do you want to pay for this?
Well, first off, you take out the non-infrastructure priorities. I had a meeting with President Biden, with Vice President Harris, Secretary Buttigieg, and a group of Republicans and Democrats were in the Oval Office a few weeks ago talking about the president's priorities on infrastructure. We begged them, please do not use reconciliation for infrastructure, because we knew then what we're going to find out now, that they're going to try to disguise a climate priority bill that's going to raise costs on every American instead of actually working with us to rebuild our crumbling roads and bridges.
I'm just curious.
I guess when you're looking at this and you're looking at an infrastructure bill and you say you don't want it to be a climate bill, when these two issues are so closely intertwined, how do you draw that line? How do you separate the two?
Easy. The same way we've done it when we've done highway reauthorization bills in the past, when we've come together on infrastructure. You know, it was the last non-reauthorization infrastructure package, the Obama era stimulus bill, that was sold as an infrastructure bill, but it was only about 6% of $1 trillion. Now it looks like the Biden administration in their proposal wants to triple that $1 trillion cost. And I'm just interested to see the low percentage that may be invested in infrastructure.
I'm just curious to kind of get, we keep hearing about going the reconciliation process here. What from the Republican side here, how is that going to damage things if it does go through that process and what we heard so much about going into this presidency and the unity that was projected?
You know, it's disappointing. I thought Joe Biden would be a president that would thrive on bipartisanship. But since being elected, he signed historic numbers of executive orders. And the first bill that the Democrats decided to come together on, they used reconciliation, which for your viewers out there is a 100% partisan process. And that's on the tail of us coming together on 5 previous bipartisan COVID relief bills. I would have thought that President Biden and his team would have tried to capitalize on those agreements instead.
Congressman, I want to get back to the point that Jessica made, which is that so much of infrastructure is intertwined with climate right now. And I've heard you mention climate priorities a few times. I'm curious what specifically you mean by climate priorities of Democrats. Are we talking about something like building out the renewable energy infrastructure, which we have heard from both sides of the parties? I mean, that seems to be like something that there can be an agreement on. What specifically in the climate issue do you think is strictly a Democratic priority that's something Republicans won't necessarily agree on?
Well, first off, we are still incentivizing building out of renewable energy sources. wind and solar. And you look at my district, I have nuclear plants and I still have coal-fired power plants that provide that base load generating capacity that allows the American economy to expand and grow. And it allows us to compete in the global marketplace because of our low energy prices. But what we're going to see from Democrats is a push to take offline those baseload generating facilities that's going to lead to rising costs for every single American, especially those on fixed incomes that are going to have to pay a lot more just to turn on their lights each day.
Congressman, I wanted to ask about some of the other priorities that are reportedly in this $3 trillion plan. Things like paid family leave, free community college, universal pre-K are some of the ideas that are being tossed around. What do you think about those proposals, and are there any areas where you could find agreement there?
Sure, there are areas we can find agreement, but that's not an infrastructure package. Let's make sure that we work together, separate those things out, and let's negotiate and debate this in Congress.
I'd say too, when we keep hearing so much about kind of this process back and forth, it just kind of strikes me from others who are watching this play out and afraid that Republicans might fall back into kind of that position they were in under President Obama and kind of just trying to block a lot of the things going through. I mean, at what point does maybe the Republican camp here take a leadership in maybe teasing out things that they would go along with to prevent the lack of unity you were just describing a moment ago?
Well, we have done that on a wide variety of issues. And as a matter of fact, the Democrats still decide to pass their packages on a very partisan roll call vote. You're talking to somebody who's been ranked the 13th most bipartisan member out of 435 House members. I get bipartisanship. I live it. I not only talk about it, I walk the walk. But what we're seeing right now is a lot of talk about bipartisanship, but we're not seeing a lot of action.
You're set to hear from Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg later in the week. What's the biggest question you have for him?
What's he going to propose when it comes to regulatory actions? We can help get more dollars in this country invested in asphalt, in concrete on our bridges, if we don't have to have continuous environmental reviews. This is an issue that I brought up to Secretary Buttigieg in the Oval Office, and I'm planning on speaking to him this week about it once again. It's things like that that I know we can get bipartisan agreement on that is going to let any infrastructure investment dollar go further towards doing the things that we all know need to happen.